We are down at Bozedown Alpacas today. It is the day before shearing, and Mary Jo Smith of Bozedown Alpacas has very kindly agreed to spare some time to talk to us today and talk us through all the preparations that the farm here make for shearing in order to make sure that the shearing process goes all according to plan and the fleeces that are produced as a result of shearing are in the best possible condition and that the animals themselves are obviously well cared for. So we're going to talk a little bit today about how you prepare the site, because I think it'd be really useful for people to see all the effort that actually goes in to preparing the site for shearing on a commercial holding like this. So we're standing in the shearing shed at the moment, and I know that the guys working on the farm have literally spent weeks getting this place ready. So would you like to just talk us through how you prepare the shearing shed for shearing?
Absolutely. So we're very fortunate to have a large barn here for our shearing. So I know that not everybody will be able to have this set up, but you can make modifications and set up to whatever size you are. During the winter, this barn's full of hay. We also have a barn extension where we can bring, or any bit of the barn, we can bring animals in to house through the winter. So the first thing is to pressure wash it out and get it absolutely clean, ready for shearing, and taking in mind how long it takes to dry the barn, particularly under the mats that we have got. So once the barn is clean, and we then set up our shearing stations. So we have an area that the animals come into, and we'll show you that in a second, but where we're standing here at the moment is where all the action takes place. So we run a 2 shearing station because of the numbers we need to do. So we run two stations. So where these boards are set when the shearer arrives in the morning, the ropes that we use for being able to handle and keep the animals safe during shearing will be tied to the 2 different anchors, which is why we have posts standing in the middle of the barn. The animals will be laid down on these boards for shearing. And when we do that, it's a great time to get caught up on toenails too. And then we have shearing boards. So the way we do it is we shear the saddles off first. We are very careful about cross-contamination of colored fibers, because we spend all year looking after our animals to be able to produce the best quality fleece. And the worst thing we can do is have black fibers running through our white or white running through our black. So we also have 2 shearing boards. And so for the lighter animals and for the darker animals. When the animals are being sheared, and there's many different ways to do this, but we shear the saddle onto this. And so it's laying down flat. It comes off as a whole fleece. Try to keep it on the fleece as clean as we can. We don't want it folded over, because the super fine ones are really hard to then unfold. Once the saddle is done, it's removed. It's taken over to here, where we have our weigh scales set up, or we will have them set up in the morning. The fleece is then weighed, and we record it in a book. So you can see here, these are all the weights from last year if you'd like to have a look. So because we use tag numbers, it's the easiest way to do it for us with our numbers, but tag or name, we weigh the saddle. Now we weigh the board included in that, so we deduct it later. We weigh the neck and the legs so we can get a total weight. Once the saddle is weighed, we will have a piece of paper. They're not here at the moment because they'll blow away in the wind, but we write the tag number down, we write the weight of the saddle down, and if we have enough people to do all the jobs we need to do, they'll go straight over to my area where I sort and grade them. If we don't have enough extra hands, then the fleeces are carefully put into a bag, a clear plastic bag, similar to these. And it's laid into it. It's not rolled, it's not noodled. It's put into it so that when I can get round to it later, and that piece of paper goes in it with the tag number and the weight, and then it's put off to the side, ready for when I can come and grade it. And the way we put it in the bag means it comes out nicely so that it can still be a show fleece, or I can grade it easily, not getting any of the thicker fibers around the edge contaminated in with the main bit of fleece. Next to come off of the shearing is the neck, legs, and they are put into the different buckets. So we have different colors so nobody gets confused. Neck, legs, so we're doing seconds and thirds already at the time of shearing.
Seconds being the neck?
Seconds being the neck, and thirds being the shorter, coarser leg bits of fleece. Depending on who's buying my fleece, it then is all put into bags which will be set up first thing in the morning so that they go into different colors. The cerise are kept separate, the whites are kept separate, so that it's all done at shearing so we don't have to do it later. We then also have a bulk bag set up on the wall where any of the sweepings, because you'll get dirt, you'll obviously have some spit and things like that as well. Toenails, it gets swept up and put in there. But we also, one of the things that we've learned over the years is a good old leaf blower is what clears our station. So between every animal, it's blown out. So that when the next alpaca comes in, we're starting and working on a clear station. We also shear all the groups based on colors. So we don't go from white to black, back to white in the groups. We will just start with the whites and work our way down to darker colors.
So again, you're leaf blowing the whole station avoids that contamination risk from animal to
and also avoids, got to have somebody sensible on the leaf blower so we're not blowing into the animal that's being sheared on the other station. We have brooms set up. The other ones, you can see that we have towels hung on gates at the moment. That's ready in case anybody is a little scared on the shearing board and has a wee, so that we can mop it up, or if anybody spits, we can mop it up, so that we can keep everything as clean as possible as we shear through a few hundred animals in the next few days.
Cool. So what jobs do you think about doing while the animals are down? Because obviously they're down, tied down for shearing, so they can't really do very much. But there's a few things a few husbandry tasks that are safe to carry out when that's happening, where you've got a little bit of time once the animals are in place and you're waiting for the shearer to move over from the other site. You've got a few little jobs that you do. Do you want to just mention those? Yeah.
So I think it's really important to be careful what jobs you do during shearing, particularly since it's a very stressful environment. So we don't do vaccinations, we don't do anything like that, but we certainly do toenails. So everybody coming through will have their toenails done. We'll be checking them over just to make sure that nobody, because it's a great time when they're turned on their sides to make sure that there's nothing else going on. So if there are any animals that are coming through with a bit of skin issues, then we'll have creams and stuff ready to put on those. But generally we try and keep it as simple as possible for shearing.
Yeah, and with the not wanting to do vaccinations, that's really the stress of shearing itself can suppress the immune system, and when you're giving a vaccination, you want to make sure that the immune system is actually capable of mounting a proper immune response so that it's actually doing the job that you want it to do. So that's cool. Yeah. So we're now moved into the other half of the barn. The shearing stations are just over there, and we're now in this area that's got a lot of blue tarp on the floor. So,
our giant swimming pool.
Yeah. So do you want to just explain what this area is for everybody?
Yeah, because shearing is really a must-go, whatever the weather, whatever the conditions. We pray to the weather gods that we get the sunshine coming, but sometimes we can have wet mornings, or because we're by the river, we can get some heavy dews in the mornings. So my tarped over area with the fans is where, if I have any damp fleeces, I can lay them out so they can dry. So I would still skirt them So these are my skirting boards. And then we'll lay them on the floors and have fans on them just to dry them out. And if it's a really wet year, sometimes they need to be turned as well because the moisture drops down.
So if it's just those animals first thing in the morning that have got a bit of dew on them, how long would it take those fleeces to dry?
Oh, they'd be dry by the end of the day.
Okay.
It probably takes less, but we don't have time during shearing to have a check of them. But we generally have them up off the ground by the end of the day.
And how, you know, on the animals themselves, those animals that were wet first thing in the morning, if it's just dew, how long will it take those animals to be dry themselves so that you can just take them straight through?
Well, if we get a bit of wind or sun, they'll be dry within a half an hour. But that's why we don't, unless the weather is bad, the animals stay out and we only bring in a few at a time for shearing. But also the wonderful thing about Surreys, because we breed both Wakayas and Surreys, is their backlines dry a lot faster than the Wakayas. So we generally start every shearing morning with a group of Surreys.
Right. So you have this very interesting looking table here, which you process the fleeces on. So can you explain a little bit about why this table looks the way it does?
Yeah. So Ian made me this table. It's for my height specifically, for when I'm standing and sorting and grading. But this is my table that I sort and grade my Wakaya fleeces on. So one of the great things, we try to keep fleeces as clean as possible, but it will get laid on here with cut side up. And if there is any dirt or debris that's still in the fleeces, because these are rollers, the dirt tends to fall out. So by the end of a shearing day, I have quite a lot of dirt on the bottom, on the floor here. And this is where I can then skirt and grade. Now this is too big of gaps for Surreys. So you can, because we ran a JT1 here on the weekend, I do have some of the Heart of England skirting tables. So that's another way of doing it, and Surreys can sit on that. Or what I do is I have an old ping pong table that my Surreys sit on here. But they don't keep the same amount of dirt in them because of their fleeces the way these do.
And you do all of the skirting upside down?
I do both. I do both. So yeah, you get a view of when they're on the cut side up, so you can see what your follicular developments and look at the fineness and look at the brightness of their fleeces. But I will always flip them as well and look at the other side and skirt it that way.
And do you keep every single fleece separate?
Once it's here, no. So once it's skirted and graded, then I'm grading it into colors and micron batches for selling.
And then also you're keeping the show fleeces for
And then I keep the show fleeces ready, so they will already be skirted and prepped and kept in clear plastic bags in a dry area until time for showing, and then I noodle them onto the garden noodling material.
Tell me, do you recommend collecting your samples for analysis from the fleece here on the table, or do you collect it from the animals themselves?
I don't recommend doing it from here on the skirting table because it's very difficult to work out where mid-side is, and to be able to compare the animals and looking at those statistics properly, getting them from the exact same spot on every animal is quite helpful. We used to do it at the time when we were shearing, so whoever's doing with saddles would hold a bit of fleece in the right spot, but I have found actually it's much easier to do it before shearing. So all mine are done and tested already.
I was going to say, with your show fleece, do you know who's going to be a show fleece before you do shearing? Or are you using any of your process here to decide that?
Both. So I have a pretty good idea. Obviously, we've been going to halter shows, and my show team is still in quarantine because we keep them separate. Once we go to shows, they're quarantined when they come home. So they're already still separate. So we know when the show team's coming through, and hopefully those will be where our show fleeces come from. But there are always ones that we'll pick through and find when we're seeing them here, because at skirting time, it's a whole nother view of your fleeces, and you learn a lot more about them than when you're looking at them on the animal.
Cool, great. Well, I think now we'll move over to see how the flow of the animals is coming through the shearing shed.
Excellent.
So we moved outside just so that you can see how the animals flow through to the shearing shed and out the other side. Idea being that we want to handle the animals as little as possible and minimize that sort of handling stress that they go through. So Mary Jo, if you'd like to just talk through the process there.
So the alpacas are used to being handled all the time, but when it comes to shearing, shearing in itself is a stressful thing for them, and particularly when we're bringing in our pregnant girls to shear, because they're one of the first groups that we shear ready for birthing season. We don't want them to be stressed, and also because of the numbers we run, they can be staying in the shed quite a long time. So we have them out here where they can eat some hay, but in this area we'll sort them into their colors, and then we bring them in probably groups of about 8 or 10 animals at a time. So somebody's always popping out. Generally Ian pops out and refills the holding area. We always know when it hasn't been refilled that it's coffee break time or lunch break, and that's always a nice thing to see. But they just get moved out here. So again, the concreted area has been pressure washed off. It will be blown through first thing in the morning to get all the dust off, because one of the things you don't want to do, and we know how much alpacas love a dust bath, is to be rolling and being covered in dirt just before they go into the shearing shed. So we also, running up to shearing, they like to collect hay and different things through the winter. So we do move animals onto fresh grass, because the longer grass will clear up any of the debris on them quicker than anybody else. So we have a funneling system where you can move them in, and you can move them one at a time, or groups at a time, into the barn. And they just funnel in through into a holding area, and then into a smaller area, so that we can then have them waiting to go in. But to reduce the stress, we're making sure that they're not standing in here listening to the loud noise for a few hours. It's really, if we bring them in 8 to 10, it's probably 20 to half an hour 20 minutes to half an hour that they're in this system.
So how many animals are you shearing this time?
We'll be shearing 246.
And how long do you expect that to take you?
I aim a good shearing day, a minimum is 75, but we like to get close to 90. So we do have 3.5 days booked, just in case the weather decides it's going to be horrendous to us.
Yeah, it's a pretty efficient system, and I think on average that works out to be, when the animals are down, it's something like 4 or 5 minutes.
4 or 5
average.
minutes, yeah. They're not tied down for much longer than that at all.
And certainly the minimum amount of time they are, tied in place for shearing, the better it is for reducing the amount of stress that they're under. The longer they're tied down and under that stress, then the longer the stress is likely to continue. And
we're as calm as we can be with them. Obviously we have a job that needs to be done, but the more relaxed you are with the animals, the quieter they are through the whole process. So nobody is manhandled. And when the pregnant girls come through, everybody in the shed knows we're dealing with pregnant girls, because you're just that much gentler and quieter with them. Although you do try and treat them all exactly the same, but they've got much higher stresses. So when they come through, they'll come through one at a time, and they'll walk to the boards. And once they're done being sheared, they get up and...
They get up on their own, don't they?
Yeah, they do. So we'll have them in here. There'll be some more fans here. You can see that we already have our Siri combs ready to give the Siris one last clean off. These work really well for taking anything off the outer side of the Siri fleeces. They get a bit of a brush off if it's wakayas. If you're standing waiting for a mat to be free, you are picking bits off any of the fleeces, because it's easier to pick it off before than after shearing.
And you were talking then about the pregnant females and the stress they're undergoing, and obviously when you plan shearing, you can't plan shearing around births and have them, you wait for some and shear them at other times. So obviously we're going to be shearing them all while they're pregnant before they're having their careers, because we're shearing at the end of April here.
Yeah.
And so that means that inevitably there are going to be some females who potentially will have a career a little bit earlier than they otherwise might. So what's your process for monitoring that after the fact? Because obviously you're going to have to keep quite a close eye on those girls.
So as soon as they're coming through for shearing, at the end of the day, those pregnant girls, we're going to be moving them into the dew paddocks. And so we will be keeping a close eye on them. But also we have a whole funnel system where they go out, because in April, the weather can be quite different. We've had some beautiful sunshine, but we've got some cold winds at the moment. So I like them to fill up on dry matter. So we have hay racks hung out. So once they go through shearing, while the rest of their group is being sheared, they'll be on a hard standing area where they're munching through hay, because I have once we're set up for shearing, bringing them in is difficult. So I have a theory where we warm them up from the inside out. And so dry matter and hay is far better to keep them warm than them from going out and eating cold, wet grass.
Yeah, and this time of year it can sometimes be a little bit chilly at night, can't it?
Yes.
Looks like we're going to have some nice weather during the day this week, but perhaps a little bit chilly at night.
And we will go out, so they'll all have hay racks out in their fields. But if the temperature is looking like it's dropping, so if it stays like it is right now, then we'll be going out and throwing wedges of hay out into the new fields that they're going into, so that they can eat it and also sit in it to keep warm.
And obviously making sure that they're in good body condition before we get to this point is also really good for their immune systems, for their ability to withstand that cold and everything as well.
Yeah, so we're always body condition scoring, but we've gone through them. Kirsten and I have just gone through and body condition scored our pregnant girls again today, so that we're aware if there are any issues before we get to shearing.
That's great. Well, I think we've pretty much covered everything, unless you can think of anything else we should talk about.
I don't think so. It's just making sure that you're organized for whatever setup that you have. If you can bring them in of a night, depending on what your barn system's like. We only bring in a few if it's going to be horrendous rain. But it's just getting organized and trying to get through it as best you can with whatever system and setup you have.
And have you got any recommendations for people in terms of organising themselves ahead of the shearing when they're getting the shear out? If they've only got a small number of animals, is there anything that they can do to help prepare the place? I mean, obviously this is a perfect setup, but would you recommend they do it undercover or outside?
Undercover if at all possible, because then you can shear whatever the weather is. Having electric is always a good one. I've known shearers turn up and there is no electric in the fields. If you don't have concreted floors or anything like that, then tarps are really good to set up so that you're not on dirt floors and trying to keep the animals clean. Having whatever you're going to put your fleeces in, so that you can either put your seconds and your thirds separate, and keeping your saddles as clean. And my biggest one is don't roll them. That's the hardest thing to unravel later when you go back to trying to get it ready. But having a think what you're going to do with your fleeces, who you're going to sell your fleeces to, or if you're going to be processing them yourself. If you know what the intention is to do with them, you'll be better ready to set up with how you deal with the fleeces as they're coming off the animals.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for that. I hope shearing all goes really well for you over the next week or so, and I think we'll try and come back after shearing and see how you go through processing those fleeces. So thank you very much indeed for your time today.
You're welcome.